Well, hello and welcome to that beautiful hour of the day where you just sit back and relax and we bring you topical issues of the day and discuss it in depth, which you like, I know. And today, obviously, what else can we talk about? About the most anticipated budget in a very, very long while. We've all been sitting and waiting for this budget. Indeed, this morning I tweeted that, are you ready for the born again budget? Because it just looked like it was actually going to win souls for Christ or win souls for Muhammad. And it was our solution to everyone. And the budget was indeed delivered. And as usual, the nation was split. Those who are pro-MPP were very excited. I don't know if it's fair, but then, people who are traders who seems to clear things from the harbors and the ports, who eventually got their duties scrapped off, were very excited. But then there's another school, which is obviously the minority in the House, who think this was a 419 budget. Siedun Ketia said it's just a sugar-coated bitter pill, and everything happened. So, as I always say, what happens if you're Ghanaian? If you don't understand economics and you don't understand taxes, where do you place it? And that's where we come in. We try and find neutrally balanced guests to come and just explain the thing as it is on paper so you can take something from it. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. My name is Nana Acquah, the fourth Akwemodu Masahene, and your favorite current affairs talk show host. When I come back, I will introduce my guest and we're going to talk taxes and budgets. And thank you very much for staying. 2017 budget. I'm sure if you don't know that it happened today, then there must be a huge, huge question mark. Ken Oforiatta, the finance minister, went to the House today, read out his budget about 2.5 hours. Indeed, somebody has nicknamed him Mr. Abolish. Literally abolished as much as he could while he was on there. And here we are. But with me in the studio is a very good friend, Abdullah Ali Nachia, who's a lawyer and a tax expert. You're welcome.
Thank you, Nana.
Let me add that Abdullah flew all the way from Nigeria on our behalf to come and do a show for us. So, we are very, very, very grateful. Anybody would have said, look, I'm too tired, I'm going home. So I'm straight from the airport. So PM Express and our viewers are very grateful to Abdullah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But before I even go on, actually, let's just get some of the sound bites from what happened in Parliament today.
With this budget, abolish the 1% special import levy. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on financial services. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on selected imported medicines that are not produced locally. Initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery. We will initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery for production within the context of the Acquah Common External Tariff Protocol. We will abolish the 70.5% of domestic airline tickets. We will abolish the 5% VAT on real estate sales. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish excise duty on petroleum. Mr. Speaker, we will reduce the special petroleum tax rate from 70.5% to 15%. We shall abolish levies imposed on Kaya by local authorities.
Well, there you go. Abolishing. I don't want to say Mr. Abolish. But let's hear the response from just the immediate past Finance Minister. What did he think about what was going on?
Has not been done. The ESLA has not been removed. The corporate tax has not been reduced to 20% yet. You know, you have not seen a total eradication of the 17.5. We raised it from 15, you know, to 17.5. All that has been done, you know, is to pick a few. And I think the speech writers should have been a bit more careful also. There is no national tax on Kayaye. You know that this is a local government, you know, tax.
So that was a mistake. There is no tax like that.
I'm only laying the records. I like the Ghanaians to know that there is nothing like a national Kayaye tax. It is a local government, you know, policy to impose those levies. If you want them to go, the right place is to go to the district assemblies. And the question is, if it's for Kayaye, is it for truck pushers? Is it for the porters? You know, that class. And this is also one very important thing. We do not impose taxes only on account of revenue. We do impose taxes on account of efficiency and on account of equity. And so the point is we have an expanding services sector. And so you cannot continue to take the services sector out of the tax net forever. I think you are not being efficient. And I think these are some of the issues, you know, which I think with time we are going to be discussing.
You think that the minister was selective in his whole tax approach? That's what you think?
Well, that
could have done better.
That could be your conclusion. I just said that we are not saying, no, please, I just gave you the rendition that we have not seen a reduction in the corporate tax to 20%. We have not seen a removal of the ESLA. We have not seen a rollback of the additional 2.5% on the VAT across board. And there are issues also we need to be careful. For example, well, I understand you may want to pamper to say, you know, spare parts dealers, but is Ghana going to be a source of smuggling where goods are going to, these spare parts are going to come to Ghana and then they will be seen across the border, and then the revenue benefit we were supposed to have gotten, you know, with the new to our neighboring state. We had this experience with very, very low crude oil prices, and we know that it encouraged, you know, smuggling. So we are only going to deprive ourselves of revenue. I'm also not sure whether, you know, the caution with raw materials in saying that it is within the ECOWAS convergence criteria has been thought through. Are we going to do this unilaterally outside the ECOWAS convergence, the ECOWAS tariff? I think we need to be patient, and I think these are issues that will be debated.
You think it's more of a populist approach? That's what you think?
No, I'm only saying that the policy, you know, could have been looked at more deeply, and the implications sought. The confidence in saying, I like the caution when it came to raw materials, that it is within the ECOWAS tariff, you know, nomenclature, and consultations will go on. You don't also move, therefore, to other, you know, taxes, import duties in particular. And by the way, we must know that all indirect taxes are costs which are deductible. And therefore, those people who often push for these taxes to be removed are those who are non-compliant.
No, but let me get the views of a member of on the Finance Committee as well, and who will also be getting the view of the Honorable Jinapo. But for you, so finally for you, government is hoping that this will spare growth.
No, for me,
engineer, private sector development, and all those things.
There was no mention of EXIM, for example, which is a prime, you know, instrument we put in place, for example, for exporters. I'm glad that it has not been taken off. I'm glad that they talk about taking out the gift. Yes, the investment, of course, yes.
Are you worried?
No, it's not going off. If you listen to the minister, in fairness to him, he said that there was an earlier proposal along the same lines. And let me assure the public that we did consider that, you know, that draft in coming up with a gift. And I see the convergence. The difference is that the emphasis of the first one was on private sector. We wanted the emphasis because the revenues were coming from the petroleum funds and linked with the debt management. You know, so it didn't go away. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of initiatives that we were told would go away, which haven't gone away.
Well. First of all, I just want to hear your preliminary comments on the total budget before we narrow down to the taxes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think if you look at the total budget, I keep saying, like all budgets, there are areas of hope, of promise, but the issue is with implementation. It's just like all laws in Ghana, very nice laws, but implementation has always been a challenge. So on the face of it, yes, we have all what it takes to move on, but what should we have to put in place so we realize whatever? Because the budget is the plans of the government. So if that is the plan, how do you implement it? I think going forward, that is what we need to pay particular attention to.
Should it, if implementation wasn't an issue, should it inspire hope?
It should, because it then means that anybody with the hope of achieving what the budget contains must come on board to ensure it works. If you take one example where the former Minister of Finance was talking about, if you take off import duties on spare parts, then it means you have to reinforce your borders to ensure that spare parts will not be leaving. Otherwise, like he said, you are going to be a conduit that they will go through. From the conference we were in Abuja, that's one thing that I raised. If you look at Partnership Africa-Canada, they have a report showing that Mali has become the West African hub for illicit transfer of funds from gold. Why? There are about 3 million artisanal miners within Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Now these countries come together and say all exports of gold by artisanal miners should suffer 3% export tax. But in Mali, they tax 3% up to 50 kilograms of gold. So if you have 100 kilograms, the 50 goes without tax. So the artisanal miners from Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso are moving the gold into Mali to pay only on the first 50 and the rest leaves. And so that is what he is looking at. We have a nice policy. We want to spur on trade. The business sector must boom. So we are going to lessen your burden of the indirect taxes. But if it comes in without tax, we as a nation have lost the revenue. If it finds its way into other countries, they will tax it. So the income that we should have had, we've lost it. The other way is this. You've been given a relief from the import side. It means that you will be making a lot of sales because your cost has gone down. How are we going to trace and tax the profit that would arise? Are we capturing them in the income tax segment? Because taxation is of tax handles. You drop one handle, you must have something to hold on. Otherwise, there will be a gap. And so for me, that is what I mean by the implementation. You are taking off import duties on spare parts, fair enough, but then it means the person's cost of doing business would go down because like the former minister said, the cost is deductible. Now you have no cost, so no deduction. Your profit should be higher. There should be a tax on your profit, and then we should get something back from you. Are we going to ensure we get that?
So back end rather than front end.
Exactly. You want to release them from the front end and wait at the back end. Because remember, if you are dealing with some segment of taxpayers, they are not too clear. I'm paying tax at the port. I'm paying tax on this. But we have different types of taxes. Indirect taxes and direct taxes. Indirect taxes are on goods and services, imports. Now when you've sold them and made profit, the gain you made is what the government says, give me my share. That is a direct tax. So once they don't get this distinction, they would not see why they should pay. And that for me is the implementation problem. As we are giving them a relief from the front end, what are we doing to make sure they all get registered? They all get noted by the revenue. So as you get the benefit, you give back something by way of your profit. That for me is what we should look at by way of implementation.
Well, I think one of the biggest questions that's been asked today is abolish, 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 abolish. So, you know, where do you find money, you know, to run the country?
That is the good question that I've always been asking. The issue is, as I've always stated, and you rightly put it, front end and back end. The end result is that there should be some revenue inflows. One thing that I think there's nothing wrong with is the abolishment of the 1% special import levy. For me, before you clear goods from the port, you need a tax clearance certificate showing that you have a tax file, you've paid your taxes, you've paid the taxes of your workers, directors have filed their returns. So you're a good corporate citizen. Based on that, you're able to get your goods out. Now the special levy came in to say, if you pay 1% at the port, you can clear your goods. What happens is that if I don't have a good record with the revenue on my direct taxes, I'll go and pay the 1% and clear the goods and keep selling. Knowing very well, if I want a tax clearance, I'll be forced to clear the backlog of taxes I have. So if we take it off, we have to then ensure that the tax clearance certificate for clearing goods system works. Otherwise, you open up yourself to more losses. So the implementation for me is key. If you take off this tax, what intention did you have? What measures have you put in place to ensure you don't lose twice? That for me is the key. If you take the VAT on financial services, I believe strongly that if the previous minister had been there, he may have considered taking it off as well. Because what I see is that with the financial services, you may have to sit down with the financial sector and look at the tax equivalencies. Is it the case that if we get a corporate tax increase for you, it will be more preferable than the VAT on financial services? Because we are looking at it as a cost to the person who is putting the funds in the financial sector. If you go and take any services of the bank, the law says that once there are services for which you have to make a charge or a fee, there should be VAT on it. So for example, if you are an employee, your main source of income is from employment. Your son is in school. School fees are paid by bank drafts. So you need to go to the bank to get a bank draft. There is a fee for the bank draft. There will be a VAT on it. Is it not hitting your salary? Because that's your main source of income. So for paying your wards fee, you are incurring a cost. So for me, that was a good thing to take off. But in that instance, what informed the imposition of the VAT? One, taking it out, what would it entail and what other measure can be taken? I was saying, can we discuss with the financial sector? Your corporate tax is 25%. If you were to pay 28% and no VAT on financial services, what would it be like? And that's what we call tax equivalencies. You find another way that would not distort the market. Because we already have a challenge of unbanked population.
So as for the tax, you have to pay.
As for the tax, you have to pay.
But it's just how you pay.
But how you pay it and where you take it from. Because taxation is like plugging feathers from the goose. See, when you plug, it will quack because of the pain. So a good tax system is like plugging the feathers, getting more feathers with little hissing. That's the strategy. So if they complain, people complain, this tax is killing us, it's hampering our business, the hissing is too much. So you try finding out how can I go about it, get the maximum revenue with little impact. Because every tax raises a bit of distortions. So you want the minimum impact on the economy. Because the distortion could be said that if your intent is revenue, you may not get the revenue you want. Because people will now go into the underground economy. You won't find them to tax them. But like the former minister said, you realize that taxation is not all about revenue. Some would be about sharing resources. For example, if you give incentives to businesses establishing in the 3 northern regions, it's not about revenue, but to encourage businesses to operate there, to create jobs, and invariably reduce the rural-urban drift and the Kaya menace. So you have a long-term reason for giving some incentives to certain sectors. But you are losing tax revenue, but for a good reason. Because all the problems that will be associated with the drift and the funds you would require to solve the problem would not arise.
Okay.
So that is the beauty of taxation. You need to test it and then weigh the cost-benefit analysis and know which one to deploy.
Could this be the reason why the previous government front-loaded everything? Because then implementation matters don't come in. I'm just
And that is the challenge with front loading as well, because you know any production process, indirect taxes are on goods and services. So it's a cost to doing business. If they are high, you are unable to get competitive prices for the final output. So it affects your back side, and the tax that we need from the corporate tax, we won't get it, because businesses will be shutting down because they can't meet the operational costs, utility bills, petroleum taxes, so they are unable to compete. So they fold up, or they cut down their output. They will lay off workers. There will be unemployment. So you are weighing the, if you front load, it comes with its challenges. So you need to balance it. Which are the kind of taxes I can front load, and which are those that I can stem the tide and wait at the other end. If you push all up front, you have the challenge.
With our implementation track record, it means that this budget and this government, are skating on very, very thin ice.
I would say very thin, because if you take the preamble to the incentives that the minister read, he made a preamble that notwithstanding the challenges, because he started with our debt profile, our debt GDP ratio 73%, want to bring it to 65%. So if you have all these challenges to solve, the revenue you need to solve it, because government does not do business. And the main source of revenue to government is taxation. So the main source of revenue you need to solve the problem, you are reducing it. Then it becomes a challenge. How am I going to surmount that? But you are reducing it for good reason. Let me reduce it at the front end, let them make the money, then I go to them at the back end and say, well, this is fair. You've made gains. Give me my share to come and plug the loopholes. If it works that way, that is fine. That is why I'm saying that the implementation, the monitoring by the revenue institutions, the involvement of every stakeholder to ensure that we attain that is the challenge. Because government will not give you a relief up front and then you want to cheat government at the end. And that's a double jeopardy. Because if you listen to the challenge, everybody was expecting corporate tax to come down from 25 to 20%. It could not. Why? You don't just jump like that, because the 25% is competitive in the region. We are one of the lowest corporate tax regimes in the sub-region. So if you want to make any such move, it has to be gradual. You can look at the 25 in your first year, 2017. In 2018, you can come down to 23%. Look at the response in terms of revenue inflows. And if it's good, then you can say, I'm going down to 22 in 2019. By 2020, I'm at 20. But if you try it next year at 23 and revenue dips, then the stimulus you gave by way of tax incentives upfront to ensure they can make more money and give back to you is not working. So if you go deep down, then you are losing all out. And that is why I'm of the view that in the implementation, we need to ensure, like he rightly said in the budget, the Honorable Minister, structures and institutions, the GRA is going to be, and that statement has been in all budgets. We are going to reinforce the GRA. We are going to ensure this. We will ensure they do A, B, C, D. But one of the key issues is tax audit. In the US, they will tell you, you find the tax officers crawling all over. What it means is they don't sit in the offices waiting for you to pay tax. They are in every office, every taxpayer, checking your records, whether you are complying.
But they are feared more than the police.
That is my worry. They are feared more than the police. I'm sure when people see taxmen in the US, they will run more than if it was a policeman or a military man in uniform. It's the reverse here. Because you see, over there, you see what the tax money is used for. When we arrived at the airport this evening, go and see for yourself live band music welcoming you at the arrival hall whilst you are checking in at immigration, and everybody was amazed. And I said, this is the advert we need. See what your tax money is doing for you. If anybody who has been traveling looks at the airport today, of course you will see the improvement. But it is taxpayers' money. Even if they borrowed to do the renovation by the previous government, now we'll pay during this government. So if you make it look as if it is done by loans, grants, then the person will not see why he should pay taxes. But he has to pay for that loan to be repaid. And that is what we need to sensitize citizens to know. You drive on Dubai, cycle Dubai, fine, but it's your taxpayers' money. It's not a gift. It's a loan. It will be paid for. If we get to relate to this, you will find out that tax is not about after paying your tax, food will be put on your table or clothes will be sold for you to wear. You won't get that direct benefit. There are a lot of indirect benefits. If the schools are good, the teachers are well paid, and your children are well taught, you will not see that is your tax money, but they are paid from the tax revenue. This is the connection that is missing, and that is why in other countries you find the compliance level, because they know what it takes, what the money is going to be used for.
So you think the narrative should change? Or, you know, because instead of tax, we hear more of loan, you know, so...
Exactly what if you look at what the Minister of Finance said, Mr. Kedofra, he said that you're moving the country off debt. You don't want to be debt. Now you want to generate your own resources. How do you do that? All hands must be on deck. Compliance is key. How compliant are people in paying their taxes? At the conference, there was a debate. People were saying that when our forebears were fighting for independence and tax was being introduced, what did they say? No representation, no tax. So they had to be allowed into the council. Then they also agreed to start paying tax. Is it not the same system we are in now? Take the database of voters. Look at the adult suffrage age for Ghana for voting, and take the database of people who are working, and take those who are paying tax, and you see the gaps.
It doesn't add up.
So it wouldn't add up. Because definitely 18 and above does not mean you are working. You could be in school, but at least a percentage of that voter population would be in the working class. And then how many of them? If you take the statistics, it's not changing very much. Taking our population of 25 million, and then you are told we have 4.5 million active taxpayers, those who have to pay tax, and yet 1.5 are paying. Got a gap of 3 million, where are they? But they are earning income. So my worry is, if we don't get all those who are supposed to pay, how do we rake in those who are not paying?
One thing the budget was raising was the national ID and digital registration.
Correct.
How would that help?
Very helpful. Even before that, take the linkage between Registrar General and the Ghana Revenue Authority. How many companies, how many partnerships, how many self-employed registered businesses are in the database of the Registrar General's department? Let's compare that with what the GRA would have as registered taxpayers who are self-employed, partnerships or companies, whether it's the same. Being captured in the database does not mean you have to automatically pay tax. Tax is on profit, your gains. So if you are running a business and you are losing, nobody will come and hold you to pay tax. We don't have a loss tax. You should rather get support. Now, if the database shows that we have 20,000 businesses, only 5 are paying taxes, it means 15 are making losses. That is when you're able to find out what is making it difficult for you to make profit and give me, well, my import duty is high. By the time I pay my electricity bill, water bill, I have little left, pay some workers' salaries, and everything else goes as a loss. What can we do for you? Well, you can look at my indirect costs, utility bills, electricity, then you deal with it. And you find out by the following year how many of them have been able to come put their heads above water. Out of the 5, now we have 15. It means out of the 20, we had 5, now we have 15. We've saved 10, and we move on. The statistics, the data, what are we doing with it? Now, that aside, if we bring in the national identification, already we are working with taxpayer identification number. How many people have taxpayer identification numbers? All employees are supposed to have taxpayer identification number. All directors of companies, all partnerships. How many are complying with that? My worry is what system exists should be perfected and rolled into the new one we are bringing on board. Otherwise, we will get it done, and as I mentioned, implementation, zero. Everybody will be having national identification number, but how do they box into the tax net? It will still be a challenge. But it's fantastic idea, but can we start, as we are developing the national ID, solve the problem with the taxpayer identification number, company registration? So I'm sure if you've talked to some people, they will tell you they've been receiving text messages from Registrar General with penalties, 300, 200 for non-filing. Very good beginning, because I was wondering, with telephone, ICT, how come we are doing mobile money transfers? We can't send people notices and bill them on phone. They're always on their phones. They can't avoid seeing. But if you post it, he won't go to the post office. But you send it on text, he will see it. WhatsApp him, he will read it. So we have to meet them with the new technology.
And you know he read it because it will take blue.
Exactly. I know you've got it, but it will take blue. So you can't come back and say, I never received a demand from you, so I didn't know I have to pay. We need to move with the technology. So it's a good idea.
The euphoria, how does it help? Because you know the exports, and the importers and exporters society, you know, they're all over the moon today. Spare parts dealers are very excited. Does the euphoria help in any way, or can you channel the euphoria somewhere?
I see the euphoria just like what came up when Ghana found oil, and now you see where we are. We seem not to know where the oil revenue is, what is being used for, where is it going. Same euphoria. Now with these promises that you have in the budget, if you do not assist the government in your own capacity, in all your circumstances to comply and assist, the euphoria will just wither away. Because at the end of the day, if government does not get the anticipated revenue at the back end to support all its programs, the programs cannot be implemented.
Let me go back to this education on taxes.
Okay.
You see, every government prides itself that I was the one who was able to borrow this money and then I built that road. No, we borrowed that money before you came.
Before you came.
So you didn't even borrow. And so if we were to change the narrative to what you were saying, that listen, with your tax money, I've been able to do this road, you think it will come home a bit more?
It will come home a bit more. That narrative should change to, you borrowed to build this, I have come to pay it with taxpayers' money. Then I let you know that you should have collected and paid before leaving, isn't it? But the gestation period of projects and the inflows are at variance. They don't. If you were waiting for the inflows to get the project, then it will not be possible. But anytime you need to borrow, my question is, have you done the cost-benefit analysis and also looked at how to raise revenue to settle during the gestation period? You know it's going to take 2 years to complete this road. It will take 5 years thereafter to pay. What are the set programs and policies to mobilize to settle? Which inflow did you look at to do that? That is where we need to go. Because everything that we find is not free. I keep saying that any borrowing is postponed taxation. All the high taxes we came to meet, we are now bringing down, is because borrowings had gone on earlier and we need to settle. And knowing government does not do business, relying on exports is not helping because commodity prices are falling across the world, then you have nothing than to go back to tax. And that is what led us where we found ourselves. So coming down, it means you are going to look at the alternatives, exports. Because if you read the narrative on the situation of Ghana in 2016, there were nice pictures being drawn that we still had 3 months cover for imports. We were able to reduce we managed to move from a negative to a surplus, a deficit to a surplus for the first time. So there were good stories. Now the question is, how was that done? And how can we improve on that? And that is one good thing I found with the budget, that most of the policies are not new. For example, incentives for employing fresh graduates was introduced under the late Honorable Bauredu. So it's been there. But how many companies know that if I employ a fresh graduate, I'm going to get an incentive of the value of the salary I pay the person plus more, so that we can create the employment drive for the unemployed graduates? It's been there. So if you have a budget continuing certain programs that were started and were found to be positive, it's good. It's not about jettisoning all what you came to meet and then starting everything afresh. That was the good thing I found with the budget. A lot of the policies in there that are not new. If you talk about streamlining the fiscal space by taking off tax exemptions, previously tax exemptions were under Section 11 of the Internal Revenue Act 2000, Act 592. The heading was industry concessions. All these have been taken off under the new Income Tax Act, Act 896. During your holiday period, you have to pay 1%, and after that, the normal tax rate. So at least you will still get something during the holiday period. And so if it comes to that, what is in the tax law has been dealt with. What is left is the issue of exemptions on loans and grants, where the government will go in for a loan to construct a facility, be it a bridge, a hospital, or a school. You give exemptions for the materials, equipment for the project. And then you also exempt the income of the expatriate employees. They will be taxed in their country on the income you've exempted here. And you still have to pay on the, because they are being paid from the borrowed amount, you have to pay tax on it. And so that is what has to be dealt with. And I know that, yes, the previous government started something on that, and it is good that it's being continued and would be completed. That is a good thing. Less centralized. And nobody should have any automatic exemption. Make a case. Let's look at the issues.
Yeah, that's what I was really coming to, because what we realize is that, you know, people, donor agencies come with a machine to come and do free eye care, free, you know, cleft operations, and their machines are stuck at the port because they can't pay the duties. I mean, so in that case, you pay your duty, come and say, I'm doing free eye care, so give me back.
That is the unfortunate thing. I think that was also being addressed in the budget, that the minister said they are going to look at all such, because that is really the sad aspect. There are a lot of NGOs that may have support for hospitals, schools, and other facilities, and yet the goods get to the port and there's a need for a payment. But think of it, some of the NGOs have not also held matters when some of the items may be diverted or be found where they weren't supposed to be. It creates a problem. And so for me, the direction should be very simple. If you are bringing hospital equipment to assist a hospital to do any cleft operation, we have the Ministry of Health. Which hospital are you teaming up to work with? That hospital should make the application through the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Health to the Minister of Finance, and then it will go to the Customs Division of the GRA. When the goods are cleared, now that is the issue of the monitoring. We have to follow through to ensure that we've given the exemption for a particular purpose, and that only would be served. If we finish with the equipment, there are some of them who leave it with the hospital. Some send their materials back because they are moving country to country. We need to know all this. If they have to go back, we need to make sure all was accounted for and sent back and not lost in the system or sold to somebody in the system because the duties were not paid. If it is staying with the hospital, of course, government would have had to buy for the hospital. So if no taxes on it, fair and good. That is how we need to evaluate the exemptions. Because if you take the taxes and duties on it, you are taxing yourself as government. and it doesn't help. But we need to go into all that and be sure that yes, it belongs to the people of Ghana, and that is why we are not taxing it.
We're going to go to and take a bit more sound, but before we do that, 17.5% of real estate.
Yes.
Was it a wise move?
No, when the law came out, it was 17.5 on real estate, and the Real Estate Developers Association, GREDA, made a case that it was on the high side. In fact, they weren't even in the catchment area. My take on that is that we still have a huge population of people who are not housed. But the challenge again is that, yes, it's a good thing to take it off, but the idea is the people who supply to that industry, sand and stone contractors, carpenters, masons, nail suppliers, iron rods, how are we making sure they are also complying with the tax law? Because if you leave it off like that, it will have a flow down the value chain. And that, for me, is the challenge the revenue may be having. But for real estate, yes, it should go off. But then the challenge has always been, where are the affordable houses? That is what the complaint has been. Where are the affordable houses? And I expect that with this 5% taken off, they should also reciprocate, patronize made in Ghana cement for their production processes. Diamond cement, pozzolana. Let another industry boom on your back, and we create the jobs, create the incomes in the economy.
Let's listen to Acquah, who's a member of the Finance Committee.
We are in exciting times. The change that Ghanaians voted for was not a change for its sake. It was a change for the way we do our things, and more importantly, a change in the economic and living circumstances of Ghanaians. This budget has sought very successfully to deliver on these. So you see the minister deliver on the commitment we made to the people of this country. And then two, you also see the effort we are making to correct some of the liabilities, the weaknesses that we have inherited. And we have done this, as we promised, by reprioritizing. We are cutting the waste, and we are putting money where it ought to be. We are cutting taxes because we want businesses to do well, to open up, and to provide employment for our people.
Well, that was Acquah, but let's hear what Arthur Folsom, immediate past Deputy Finance Minister, let's see how he disagreed.
I can see the budget is very deceptive, it's very populist. In fact, it's not well thought through. Some of the policies cannot preserve the country's medium-term challenges that we are likely to go through. But I can only say that Ghanaians should brace ourselves for bigger challenges ahead of us. I say this because, one, the finance minister said that they have removed taxes relating to the special import levy. And he mentioned that they have removed only the 1% of the special import levy. I think it's deceptive, very deceptive, and very, very populist, because the special import tax has two main components, the 1% and the 2%. He only came to Parliament to remove the 1% element. That 1% element, when you are to quantify it, is under 100 million. The main one is the 2%. The 2% of the special import levy, that will give you total revenue of about 568 million. He was silent on that. It's nothing but very deception. Let me also talk about the other one that he mentioned. He talked about the fact that in their manifesto, they are going to scrap taxes on raw materials. Today, in his presentation, he was silent about it. The only one, taxes on raw material, import duty on raw materials, that he mentioned was on the pharmaceutical industry. Why wasn't he so open to announce that he was going to remove all of that?
Say that they have 4 years to rule this country. In their manifesto, there wasn't any clear timelines. If any government has just started, and even the first year, they've given these indications, some people might say there is more to come.
Let me say that they were very categorical during their campaign that in their first budget, for instance, they are going to reduce the corporate income tax from 25% to 20%. Today they are pushing it to 2018. By the end of 2018, they will say they can't do it. They are pushing it to the next administration. What is this? This is deception. The so-called taxes they claim they have removed, if you are to quantify them, it's less than $1 billion. It's less than $1 billion. They decided to be quiet on those big tax handles that they have promised Ghanaians. They were quiet. Let's go to the drawing board and quantify them one by one, and quantify what is in their budget, what is in their so-called their manifesto. You will see clearly there's a complete departure of what they promised Ghanaians and what they are doing today.
Think that if they submit the necessary regulations, there will be fine details on other things that they might want to do?
Regulations does not introduce taxes. Regulations does not reduce taxes. Legislations, probably they will come with legislation, but he announced them. Another thing that he talked about, which I find is so sad, is the fact that they are going to more or less scrap import duties on spare parts. Let me say that this policy is not consistent with the already agreement that the old cars over age cars are going to attract higher, higher tariffs at the port. He should as well remove that one. Because if you fail to remove that one, you are not achieving anything. Let me say that tax policy is not only for revenue. What they have done, you know what it means? Ghana is going to be a dumping grounds for some of these spare parts.
So that was some of the concerns of our two folks in there. Get your reaction. They're a bit concerned about this dumping ground thing. If you miss on the implementation, you're doomed.
Exactly what I said. Once you have taken off the import duties, how are you going to ensure that what parts are coming in are standard and are meant for Ghana and not for transshipment? That is the challenge he is referring to. And one thing I agree with is the fact that I mentioned earlier, taxes are not always for revenue. If you put in the monitoring mechanism to ensure that really good parts do come in, you have the long-term objective of stemming the tide of road accidents. Because if I get bad parts for the vehicle, then you can see what can happen. So the fear that if monitoring mechanisms are not put in place and this policy turns Ghana into a dumping ground, then that's going to be a big challenge. But I expect that if you are taking off import duties on spare parts, the law that is coming to implement this should come out with the fine details. That is the challenge about the budget. They will come out with the broad policy initiatives and plans of government. Now the laws will be prepared and laid before Parliament. I'm sure at least this gives them an idea what to look out for when the law comes. Whatever systems they want to put in place to ensure Ghana does not become a dumping ground, that is the point. And if at that point nothing is put in to stem that, then that law can be fought against and it will not see the light of day. That is the way to go.
Another tax which personally I thought was a good idea, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but it's the local airline VAT tax. I felt that there was a time where they seemed to be growing and they were just
shut them,
snipped off just like that. And this, I think, is a good idea.
I see it as a good idea. Not only that, but also the special petroleum levy. Because the two were affecting the domestic airline industry. It made their costs high. I remember Flight 540 left the system. It could not basically have been only the taxes anyway. There could be other reasons. But you also realize that some of them reduce their frequency to certain destinations. And so we wait to see whether that was the reason why that happened. We should see a rebound. If we don't see that, then we can say that a good policy, but that wasn't their problem. We wait to see. But I think that as part of the readings we had about why and the challenges they have, they did mention the VAT and then the
petroleum
tax. So I think that it's a good policy. We should see a
be allowed to grow.
It should be allowed to grow because it has a lot of, like we said, tax is not only for revenue. If you take off these taxes and there are frequent flights to certain destinations, it's going to boost tourism. If people want to go to Moli National Park in Damongo, they don't have to go by road. They can land in Tamale and then drive there. With the frequency, we may even have an airline that would decide, let's have an airstrip in the park so people can land right there. Small aircrafts can do that. That is what we have in Kenya, in Tanzania. Small crafts, 2-3 people fly, land you in the game reserve, and you take the buses, the trucks, and start sightseeing. So let's see what it can bring. People want to go to Kintampo waterfall, they can shorten their journey, fly to Sunyani, and drive to Kintampo. Let's see what that will. It is linked to tourism, and it's good.
I know you're a tax man, but I can't bring you here and not talk about free education. I can't bring you here and not talk about free education. I mean, how are they going to fund it? Since things are being snipped off here and there, and the philosophy behind it. Do you believe
I think when I heard that there was an issue about trying to take part of the oil revenue, which was debunked and all that, I was wondering, during the campaign, I remember very well what I heard was that if we had to cut down on waste and corruption, the amount that would be saved would be enough to fund that. And I believe in that because indeed, if we look at all the figures that are pointed to us in terms of the loss of revenues, in terms of corruption and all that, then indeed it could go to a large extent to support and not necessarily on going for other earmarked revenues. That is what I think. And that is one of the issues that the government needs to look at, the illicit financial flows. That is an area that we need to pay particular attention, especially natural resource sector. When we talk about illicit financial flows, we are looking at people sending money out of the country or resources out of the country, not through legitimate means, not doing the proper paperwork. I'll give you an example of an issue that Chronicle published sometime last year or last 2 years, where somebody brought in 14 Range Rover vehicles, 2014 model, and described them as Peugeot 2005 model, Citroën 2003 model, and cleared them. You can see the revenue loss.
I was just going to ask you, how much are we losing at the point?
And then we all read of the Indians sending gold through Kotoka International Airport without documentation, and it was seized. Were we able to find out from, we are signatories to multilateral exchange of information agreement. Were we able to get the authorities in India to tell us how many times have these companies brought you gold? Because the one on Mali was easy to know because their exports to United Arab Emirates in 2013, they said they exported 40 tons. But from UAE, they said they imported 49.8 tons. So there's a difference of 9.5. So the data can be relied upon to know what we are losing. If a forestry operator says, I exported 40-foot containers of logs, what was received at the other end? Because if they beat the system here, over there they couldn't, the true values will be known. And then we will be able to see what has been lost. We go after them and get it back. Because if you take the ASEP report in February 2015, between 2002 and 2011, Ghana lost $14.39 billion from natural resource sector alone. 10-year period, on average, $1.44 billion. How much did we borrow from IMF? 900 and something million. Over 3 years, on average 300 and something million against 1.4 billion loss. Are we net borrowers or net creditors?
So they have to.
They have to plug loopholes, shine their eyes, block loopholes.
Is it possible?
It is possible. You know, I don't like tax forces. If you set up a tax force, to me, it's an admission of failure of systems. Why should there be a tax force at the port to ensure that all the agencies there are doing what they should do? Don't we have reporting lines? If we have reports of short collection, are we not to dismiss or sanction officers? The tax force, you go to the port and you see the number of institutions. You have customs, you have BNI, you have Gapoha, you have so many of them. And then the tax force again. You have a challenge. Take the revenue. You find a tax force locking up shops. We are moving towards voluntary compliance. You need to educate the taxpayer, guide the taxpayer to comply with the law. You go lock up his shop. What if he starts supplying from his house? Do you know his house? Are you not pushing him into the underground economy? We have in the GRA the unit that will be operational unit that will assess. There's a taxpayer services. If a taxpayer has complaints or issues, we have the debt enforcement and debt management unit. Then you set another tax force. So what does the debt collection unit do? What are they doing? One of them must not exist. If you want the tax force to be collecting tax debts and monitoring debts, then you don't need a collection and debt monitoring unit.
One day we shall continue this conversation. And it has been educative, if I may say, but thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I always give you this number before I go, and it's 024-366-2001. 024-366-2001, and that's Tante's Fashions. They make my shirts for the show, and they're doing a 10%. So it's PM Express or Nana to get your 10%. TM Express or Nana to get your 10%. Thank you very much, Forcing Director. Thank you, Aisha Ibrahim, Producer. And for you at home, tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. Indeed, tomorrow is History Month, yeah? So we'll have Professor Matheson continuing the history on Ghana politics. You don't want to miss that. Thank you, Zach.